So a while back, I had some friends over and I made homemade pizza. And the pizza that I made was very popular. And I was trying to explain to people this dough recipe is actually very, very simple and very, very fast. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to do that for you now. So what we need first is 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. So that's what we're measuring out here. And mixing in is 1 cup of lukewarm water. I've already mixed in a tablespoon of cane sugar, which is why we get that brown color. And the reason I mixed the cane sugar into the water was also because it's quite lumpy, so I didn't want to get those lumps undissolved. So the first step is quite simple. So all you're going to do is mix these 2 ingredients together and then add in a tablespoon of olive oil. So I'm going to do that next. I'm just trying to make sure that all of the yeast is dissolving. Okay, so going to add in 1 tablespoon of olive oil into the mixture. Doesn't have to mix in well, that's okay. We'll mix it in later. And then we're going to let this mixture sit for about 5 minutes. And the reason why you want to do this is we call this proofing, because you want to make sure that, number 1, your yeast is alive, but it also starts to help to form some bubbles, to develop some flavor. So we'll let this sit for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to it, and then we will form our dough. This dough in total takes about 30 minutes, and you don't even have to wait for it to rise. Okay, so now we can see that our mixture has been proofing, and this is longer than 5 minutes, mostly because I was also filming another demo, but the whole point is to get it so that you can see that it is alive and fizzy, and when you smell it, you can definitely smell the yeast. So now what I'm going to do is add in a teaspoon of salt into the mixture. Try and let that dissolve a little bit, and then we're going to start adding in the flour. So I've got 2 cups of all-purpose flour here. Okay. You can see that the color of the dough is a bit of that brownish color just because of the cane sugar. If you want your dough to be a bit whiter, then you can use honey, you can use other types of sugar, it's fine. As long as it's a sugar, because you need that to sort of be feeding your yeast and get that chemical reaction. Okay. So we see that moisture is coming in and mixing up with that flour. What I want to do now is take this mixture and turn it out onto a board so that I can work the dough a bit more. So here I've got half a cup of additional flour that I'm just going to put onto the board. And then now we start to really knead the dough and incorporating that additional flour. And it will absorb because it's still a very wet, sticky dough at this moment. You can see it's already sticking to the board a bit. That's okay. We'll just add a bit more flour so we can continue to work this dough until it really comes together. And so when you're kneading, when I'm showing people how to make this dough, I usually say, think of it as folding in. So fold in the edges and then give it a shove. I have underneath my cutting board here a damp towel. That helps to make sure that your board doesn't slide. And in fact, an excellent way to also make sure that your board is secure when you're chopping things too, much safer. So once again, folding in, trying to bring this together so that it becomes smooth and elastic. There are many other recipes out there, obviously, that where it requires a lot more time to make pizza dough. I mean, people often say when it comes to cooking, time is flavor. The reason why I always come back to this is, well, I really like having homemade pizza, and because it really doesn't take that much time. I think if you're a real gourmet expert and your palate is very sensitive, you can probably taste quite a bit of a difference between those doughs that take 2 days to make and this one. But when I had, again, some friends over and made fresh pizza using this recipe, the reviews were actually extremely positive, and they were very surprised that I had made the dough myself. In fact, with homemade pizza, I also make the sauce. So the sauce is using this type of tomato paste. And this tomato paste, it's very important to, if you can get this brand, I find, at least here in Bangkok, among the tomato paste that I've tasted, this one is not so sour, not so pasty, if I can say. Really has the flavor of tomatoes. And then it allows you to add in your own flavors. So what I do is I add into the tomato paste a little bit of sugar, some olive oil, your usual Italian spices, oregano, thyme, whatever you feel like, and in terms of the quantities, depending on what you enjoy. If you love oregano, add more oregano. I'll add some salt, some pepper, and mix that up, and it makes the perfect homemade pizza sauce. Having tried to do this with another tomato paste, it's just not the same result. The problem here is that this can is so big, I don't really need all of that to make my 2 pizzas. So I think I'm going to have to make some bolognese sauce tomorrow to use up that can of paste. So maybe that will be another food demo coming up. Okay, so we've gotten to the point now where the dough has come together. It's not really sticking. It's smooth. And this recipe is going to make 2 pizzas. So what I want to do now is clean this area up so I can roll out the dough and just show you that process. I actually have my oven on at the highest temperature right now, and I have a pizza stone in the oven that is preheating. So when we finally cook our pizza, it's not going to take very long at all, probably just about 4 to 5 minutes. Which is, in Italy, when you have a traditional Italian pizza, it's the same way. In those wood-fired ovens, they only cook for just a few minutes, usually about 3 maximum. So we'll be trying to simulate the same without the wood fire. And when we come back, then I will have this cleaned up so that we can roll out the dough and create our pizza. Okay, so I've taken that mass of dough that we had, and I've split it up into two balls or 2 chunks. The recipe generally makes 2 pizzas that will be about the size of this board, maybe a little smaller. So now what we want to do is we want to stretch out our dough. And what I've done is I've put a piece of parchment paper here, because this parchment paper is going to go right into the oven. Which will make it a lot easier getting it in as well as getting it out. I'm just trying to stretch the dough to make a bit of a, I like to go with a bit of an oblong type pizza. You're trying to go relatively thin so it can be a crispy crust. And there are other ways you can stretch out pizza dough too. You've probably seen it in Italy where they stretch it out with their hands. I've tried to do that. I don't think I'm as confident in that traditional method of stretching out pizza dough. So I'm very happy to go with my rolling pin. So here we've got about one pizza. And just to make sure that the crust remains crispy and not too bubbly, that's why this is a no-rise dough recipe, then I usually prick the dough with a fork before I add in the sauce. So here we've got our crust. It's quite thin. Adding in the sauce that I made earlier using that paste that I showed you. Trying to spread and make sure we get all of the surface area, except of course for the outside, leaving a little border. There we go. Trying to be as even as possible. Okay, so that's about right. And we'll save the rest of that paste for later for the second pizza. Now we have here some grated mozzarella. I usually start out with a layer of mozzarella first before I put on some toppings. I grated this a little while ago, so it's a bit sticky. And this mozzarella I get from an online grocery store called Jet Deli. They have some really good imported products from Italy. And then we're going to go with some toppings. So I've got some onions from earlier in the day that I used. I didn't use up the whole onion to make some chicken liver pate, so I'm going to go with that. And I've got some portobellos that I've cut up into big chunks. Actually, scratch that. I'm going to start with the salami. So we'll put some salami. This is salami al pastor. It's not spicy, but it's very flavorful. So adding in some salami. Then I'm going to go with another layer of cheese. And then after that, I'll go with the mushrooms. So to allow the mushrooms to get the direct heat, as well as I'll add in some jalapenos too, because I just have some sliced up. So jalapenos, just a few here and there. Okay, and then we'll go with the portobellos. All right, that should do it. So now our pizza has all the toppings. I like to hit it with a bit of olive oil, especially around the crust. But this will also help with the mushrooms cooking. So a bit of olive oil, and then I put on my oven mitts to put it in, just so I can avoid burning myself. So I'm going to grab the whole board, and now we're just going to slide pizza in onto the pizza stone and shut it. And it's going to take about 4 to 5 minutes. It's going to go very quickly. So we'll just cut now, but we'll watch this pizza cook very quickly, and then we'll come back when it's ready. Okay, so pizza is ready. We're just going to slide that parchment paper onto the board, and then we can gently slide the parchment out, and then we've got a beautiful pizza done within just a few minutes. Just looking for my pizza roller, which I have no idea where it is, so I'm just going to cut it. And you can hear that crunch of the crust with all those layers of toppings. And so now it's time to eat. I will stick in another pizza, but we'll end here so that Dave and I can eat the pizza while it's fresh.